George Elias Tuckett, businessman and politician, born December 4, 1835 in Exeter, England. He was the youngest son of Elias Tuckett and Mary Tuckett. He married Elizabeth Leake in 1858 and they had 4 children. In 1842, Elias and Mary Tuckett immigrated with their daughter and 2 sons to Hamilton, Upper Canada, where Elias found work as a tallow chandler. Although in later life George Elias Tuckett regretted his lack of formal instruction, he had, by the standards of his class, a sound education. For a short time he attended a local private academy. Tuckett's early employment remains unknown. He may have apprenticed as a shoemaker. In 1852, at the age of 17, he opened a shoe store in Hamilton, but his business quickly failed. During the 50s and early 60s, he entered 3 partnerships with Hamilton tobacconists to make tobacco products. His associates probably supplied the capital and did the marketing while Tuckett engaged in manufacturing or supervised others in the work. A short-lived partnership with David Rose followed his shoe store venture. Tuckett's health failed and he quit to work on a lake boat for several years. He returned to Hamilton to go into partnership with Amos Hill. In 1857 he struck out on his own again, hiring 3 or 4 men to make cigars. To retail his product, he opened a store in London. When he married, probably the following year, his wife also contributed to the business by selling cigars in the market and at fairs in Hamilton. In 1862, Tuckett gave up cigar making to manufacture plug tobacco in partnership with Alfred Campbell Quimby, a Hamilton tobacconist. The American Civil War disrupted tobacco exports to Canada and protected the new industry. Quimby and Tuckett are reported to have gone behind Confederate lines to purchase Virginia tobacco, which could then be shipped north as Canadian property. The stress of such transactions affected Tuckett's health, and in early 1864 the business was dissolved. The following year Tuckett and John Billings purchased the interest of Nathan B. Gatchell in the Hamilton Glass Works and took in 3 partners. Difficulties in marketing the glassware quickly disillusioned Tuckett, and, after just 1 year, he decided to return to the manufacture of plug tobacco, this time with Billings. Their business prospered. By 1868 Tuckett and Billings employed 70 hands, more than either of the other 2 tobacco manufacturers in Hamilton. 3 years later they doubled their plant's capacity. In 1875, the credit reporter of R.G. Dunn & Company judged the partners to be good risks. The value of their assets, including their factory, which had cost them $6,000 in 1866, was placed at $60,000 to $75,000. Tuckett possessed real estate outside the business worth $40,000 to $50,000, including a residence worth $16,000. The partnership lasted until Billings retired in 1880. Tuckett's elder son, George Thomas, and his nephew, John Elias Tuckett, then became partners in George E. Tuckett & Son. The nephew had for some time attended to the company's branch in Danville, Virginia. In the late 1880s, George Elias began reducing his active involvement in the firm, and with incorporation in 1892, the day-to-day operations became fully his son's responsibility. Reorganization had followed shortly after the completion of a model factory in 1891. A comparison of this plant with the one built 20 years earlier reveals Tuckett's attention to operational detail and his concern for efficiency. In the 1891 building, the raw tobacco was hoisted to the 3rd floor and descended floor by floor through various processing stages until it reached the shipping room, whereas in the earlier plant the tobacco had moved up and down from floor to floor. With the principle of continuous flow in place, little adjustment was required when cigarette manufacturing began in 1896. Besides streamlining work organization in his new factory, Tuckett installed fire escapes and provided lunchrooms and separate washrooms for men and women. With some success, Tuckett had been using paternalistic labor policies to promote loyalty among the approximately 400 workers in his employ by the 1880s. His voluntary introduction in 1882 of the 9-hour day as well as profit-sharing and bonuses brought him their goodwill and much favorable publicity. At the same time, different terms of employment segmented the labor force, thereby enhancing his control of the work process. The terms conformed to separate stages in the production process. Tuckett believed that piece rates for the most skilled workers, the rollers and plug makers, best sustained and increased production. If they wanted to earn the same or more income than other workers in the factory at large, they had to speed up their production. Their dependence on piece rates made them the drivers of those paid daily rates. The publicity arising from his success and his system of factory labor made Tuckett an attractive candidate for public office. Originally a reformer, he was drawn to the Conservative Party by the national policy. Anticipating a federal election, local conservatives prevailed upon Tuckett in 1895 to accept the nomination for one of the Hamilton seats. The Liberals feared his electoral appeal and offered to support him for mayor in 1896, as he was an alderman in 1863, 1864, and 1884 only if he declined to stand for the federal election. Tuckett agreed. Tuckett ran on a municipal platform of good government and low taxes. He was, however, a target for Hamilton's moral reform movement. He manufactured tobacco. He was accused of being a patron of saloons. As a director of the Hamilton Jockey Club, he abetted gambling. As a shareholder in the Hamilton Street Railway and a recipient of tax and water rate exemptions for his factory, he benefited from the very municipal expenditures he claimed were too high. The last was the most serious charge. His $85,000 exemption on an assessed value of $129,000 cost the city $1,700 a year in revenue. Yet, Tuckett won the election by a landslide. He had nevertheless alienated the Conservative Party, and with no commitment from the Liberals to support him for mayor in 1897, his re-election bid collapsed. He lost decisively. When he died on February 19, 1900, George Elias Tuckett was a socially prominent and very wealthy man. He was an Anglican and generous to his own congregation, a Freemason, and president of the St. George's Society, 1898. Besides considerable real estate, he had accumulated personal property worth $708,705, including nearly $375,000 in bank and other shares. At various times he had served on the boards of directors of the Bank of British North America, the Traders' Bank of Canada, and the Hamilton and Barton Incline Railway Company, and he had been president of the Hamilton Steamboat Company. He also had invested in the Hamilton Street Railway and the Hamilton Steel and Iron Company. Though he may not have received an extensive education, Tuckett possessed an aptitude for adapting factory organization more efficiently to mass production and a willingness to experiment with labor relations. To these qualities, his success might be attributed. The turn of the century marked the death of George E. Tuckett on February 19, 1900, in Hamilton. He was interred in a mausoleum in the Hamilton Cemetery located on York Road in the city of Hamilton, Ontario. George T. Tuckett, his son, would become the company's president until his own death in 1913. 1900 also marked the beginning of more expansions for the company. Cigar factories were opened in London and Montreal, and employment in Hamilton surpassed 1,000. During the next decade, the company's cigarette division would expand as well. New brands were introduced such as Kino, Tuckett's Turkish Special, and Tuckett's Preferred. In 1912, the company was incorporated yet again as the Tuckett Tobacco Company Limited. It then went on to obtain control of the McAlpine Tobacco Company of Toronto, acquiring several brands of cigarettes including British Navy, King's Navy, and Lucky Strike. Tuckett Tobacco's biggest period of expansion would begin in 1923 with the purchase of Tobacco Products Corporation of Canada. The following year, production of Buckingham cigarettes commenced. These cigarettes would grow in popularity to eventually hold 80% of the Canadian market for blended cigarettes. 1930 marked an interesting turn of events, as the Tuckett Tobacco Company was itself acquired by the Imperial Tobacco Company of Canada. Development continued, however, and in 1957 the company moved their offices to Main Street and invested $2 million on modernization and expansion, adding $1,250,000 worth of new machinery along with air conditioning, fluorescent lighting, and a cafeteria. All these renovations were in vain, however. In 1964, Imperial Tobacco decided to move its Hamilton manufacturing operations to its new facility in Guelph, effectively ending the Tuckett tobacco tradition in Hamilton. The structure was demolished in 1969. An apartment building now stands in its place. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe and like this video.